All right, hello, and welcome to the ACPA Leadership Elections Interest Information Session. My name is Jamie Washington, and I serve as the past president of ACPA and on the governing board, and as the chair for the Nominations and Elections Committee. I'm joined today by Wendy Sasaki, who is our ACPA Director of Equity and Inclusion and a member of the Nominations and Elections Committee. And also joining us is Chris Moody, our ACPA Executive Director of the International Office serving, and serves as an ex officio member of the Nominations and Elections Committee. We're going to move through sharing important information, and right now, Wendy is going to kick us off.
Hello, everyone. So I'd like to read the land acknowledgement. So ACPA, Student Educators International, is a leading comprehensive student affairs association that advances higher education, engages students for a lifetime of learning and discovery. Although serving an international audience, our membership is primarily from the United States, and our offices are headquartered in Washington, D.C. at the National Center for Higher Education. Related to our mission of supporting and fostering learning through the generation and dissemination of knowledge, ACPA acknowledges the painful history of genocide in the United States for Native, Aboriginal, and Indigenous peoples. We honor and respect that many and diverse tribal nations and peoples who were forcibly removed from, as well as those still connected to this land. We particularly acknowledge and recognize that the land upon which our international headquarters is located today has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst a number of Indigenous people, including the Akahonik, the Pocomoke, the Piscataway, the Anacostank, Mattapiant, the Nangamek, the Pamunkey, the Tahihant, the Natikoke, the Chihamani, the Monacan, the Mattaponai, the Nansemon, the Rappahannock, the Anistohini, Umami, and the Assateague, tribal nations, as the original occupants of the Washington, D.C. region. ACPA strongly advocates for the higher education and student affairs professionals to honor the land, the original tribal occupants, and the history of the place where you are located. Further, we have a responsibility to continually self-educate, reflect, and listen to the histories and peoples in our areas, including tribal land acknowledgements in practice, and understanding the acknowledging history is not only respectful and educational, it is the justice-oriented advocacy necessary for continuing the work of dismantling the devastating effects of settler colonialism in our society. I also personally like to add that as somebody of Japanese American descent, that acknowledging the land that I get to live on is important to me personally. As somebody whose family had been forcibly removed by this government, that I know that this is the history of many other people, and that I am fortunate to be able to live in a place, even though this is not the place of my the people that I am descended from. So thank you. Okay. So I want to share, Chris, are the slides going to come up? Great. So I want to share some information with everyone about the 2019-2020 ACPA Nominations and Elections Committee. So this is a committee that is made up of our assembly coordinators, the past president, the current president, and the vice president, myself, the Director of Equity and Inclusion, and our Executive Director for ACPA. So all of these folks serve in this position for the year and help to support the nominations and elections processes. So we have a number of positions that are available for you all to consider running for in the fall 2019 election. If you go to the elections website, you will be able to see full position descriptions online for each of these positions. So we encourage you to apply for as many as you are interested in. You have the opportunity to do that. So these are the, we'll talk more specifically about each of these types of positions in the next slides. So you can choose to run for the vice president position. This has a unique set of terms of office where it will serve a year from March to March in vice president, and then serve a one-year term as president, and then a one-year term as past president. In order to qualify to run for this position, you must have been a member of ACPA for at least 5 years and held prior leadership within the association. You must have some prior experience in leading and managing financial resources, personnel resources, setting a vision for an area and aligning resources to accomplish that vision, and strategic planning. And these are key parts of the position as this person provides the governing board with this type of leadership. And they must demonstrate effectiveness in the components of the presidential job description, which you can read on the website. We prefer that the people that we are slating have been members for ACPA for at least 7 years as a professional or faculty member, that they have sustained leadership within the association, and have at least one leadership position on the governing board, the ACPA Foundation board, the convention steering team, or have held a role of a chair or president of an ACPA entity group. And they have demonstrated significant prior experience in leading and managing a lot of those other things that I'd mentioned in the previous slide, as those are key components to the presidential positions. There will be 2 governing board members at large positions that are up for election this year. For both positions, the candidates must have been a member in good standing of the association for at least 1 year prior to their nomination. For the member at large entry level, this is somebody who must have less than 5 years of full-time professional experience at the time that they are elected. And the member at large senior level position must be a senior level student affairs or student services administrator. These are things like deans, assistant or associate vice presidents, or vice president. For their terms of office, they serve 1 year from March 2020 to 2021 as an elect, and then serve a 2-year term after that as a voting governing board member. Our current folks who will be ending their terms in March 2021 are the member at large entry level, which is Vigor Lamb, and our member at large senior level, which is Jesse Grant. There are also 2 governing board director positions that are up for replacement. One is elected and the other is appointed. Both positions must be a member in good standing of the association for at least 1 year prior and have been ACPA members for no less than 3 years. My position is one of these that is up for election. So the Director of Equity and Inclusion must demonstrate experience in the components of the job description. So these things include experience with developing policies and procedures that incorporate equity and inclusion perspectives, experience with ACPA entity groups or event planning, experience working with bias incident review or similar processes, demonstrated experience providing training to people with multiple levels of experience on equity and inclusion issues, demonstrated knowledge and application of knowledge based on multiple oppressed identities. The Director of Professional Development is also a position that you can apply for, and you must, in these, to be slated for this, must demonstrate effectiveness in the components of the Director of Professional Development job description, which you can find on the website. So similar to the members at large position, those who are elected will spend March 2020 through 2021 in an elect year, and then 2 years from March 2021 to March 2023 as a voting governing board member. So I'm currently the Director of Equity and Inclusion, and our current Director of Professional Development is Dean Kennedy. There are also 4 governing board assembly coordinator positions that are will be open for election this year. For all of these, the folks must have held the position of chair, director, or president of the entity that they wish to represent, must be a member in good standing with the association. And in the cases where there are fewer than 2 qualified candidates, due to the limited number of possible candidates, there's a different process for them to identify eligible candidates. So we can consider from the Nominations and Elections Committee side, other relevant association leadership that might help someone serve in this assembly coordinator position and help out this group. This is typically the case for our committees of practice and our international divisions. So similar to the previous 2 sets, the term of office there will be an elect term of office from March 20 to 2021. And our assembly coordinators recently, by passing of our updates to bylaws, are now voting members of the governing board. And so they have that capacity from March 2021 to 2023. Again, we have 4 assembly coordinator positions that are open. So our assembly coordinator for coalitions and networks currently is Jordan West. Assembly coordinators for international divisions is Beverly Ellis. Assembly coordinators for communities of practice is Becky Elkins. And our assembly coordinator for state and regional chapters is Alan Mueller. Okay, and I'll hand this back to Jamie.
Jamie, I believe that we're not able to hear you. If you'll unmute and start again.
Thank you so much, Chris. I was just talking away. So the nominations versus applications process. So what you'll have 2 pieces that are a part of the next phase of the process. And the first part is nominations, and folks can be nominated or self-nominate for the positions. When someone is nominated, they will then receive an email from us letting them know that they have been nominated. And after that, it's important to understand that a nomination being submitted is not enough to be considered. So it is important that you still complete an application, and that must be submitted by September 30th. The nominations may list the specific position the nominator had in mind, but the person is actually eligible to apply for any positions and not just the one that they've been nominated for. The timeline for our fall election process is as follows. So you'll see here, as named earlier, Friday, September 30th, the applications are due by the close of, by 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. And so, again, as named, you may apply for more than one position in one application. Then in October, November, the Nominations Elections Committee will determine the ballot, and the notification to the applicants about the ballot will be no later than November the 15th. From excuse me, from November 18th through December 6th, ACPA members will do the voting, and they will get their voices in to decide our next round of leaders. December 13th, candidate notifications will be completed, and then December 16th through 20th, if there's any need for runoff elections will occur. January 2020 or before, election results will be announced to our membership. That's our fall 2019 timeline. folks know early enough of their election to hopefully, I hope folks are planning to attend or join us in Nashville anyway, but definitely as they've gotten the election results. So the application components, and so some might say, so what is it that is involved and what's in the application? So there is a general contact information, so how folks can reach you, how we can reach you, the primary ACPA leadership position that you're interested in. And this information will be most likely available to ACPA voting members. So this would be information that would be shared. Upload the uploaded resume and or CV, an uploaded photo for the position posting on the ballot, your responses to free response questions, selected positions for which you would like to be considered, in addition to, the primary leadership position that was previously indicated, an explanation of your interest in other positions. So why might I be interested in something in addition to or other than the primary position? The information that will not be available to voting members will be your salient identities that would just be made aware to the Nominations and Election Committee, and your gender preferred, gender pronouns that you use and respond to. There's another part of this process that we think is important to know, because some folks might be reaching out to you and connecting, and that's our position champions. The entire ACPA Nominations and Elections Committee will make ourselves available during this process. Some committee members are actually serving as champions for various positions. The person currently serving in the role that's being elected will serve as that champion. They are a great resource of the information that's needed to fulfill each of those roles. The champions are assigned committee members who are charged with knowing as much as possible about the role that, that's indicated. Champions are also responsible for garnering interest and soliciting candidates for the particular positions. In addition, the champions will also help to lead the committee in narrowing of candidates as we get to the slating process. Our position champions for fall 2019 for the vice president is Vernon Wall and Craig Elliott. For member at large and entry level is Vigor Lamb and Brian Araro. For member at large senior level is Jesse Grant and Dre Deming. For Director of Equity and Inclusion is Wendy Suzaki and Dre Deming. For Director of Professional Development is Dean Kennedy and myself, Jamie Washington. For Coordinator for Coalitions and Networks is Jordan West and Vernon Wall. For Coordinator, Communities of Practice is Becky Elkins and Brian Araro. For Coordinators of International and Division Members is Beverly Ellis and myself, Jamie Washington. And Coordinators of State and Regional Chapters is Alan Mueller and Craig Elliott. So ballot slating and decisions. The Nominations and Election Committee's goal is to create a ballot with 2 qualified candidates per position for membership to vote on. However, ACPA standard operating procedures allows the Nominations and Elections Committee some flexibility and this flexibility to add additional qualified candidates beyond the 2. So it may just be 2, but we have the flexibility to add more than 2. The ballot and slating process. So it's important, the Nomination Selection Committee will make the final ballot decisions based upon the following information. First, minimum required criterion, current ACPA membership, and meets the minimum qualifications for each of the position. Assessment of preferred qualifications, so professional experiences, prior experience with ACPA, depth and quality of responses to applications and questions and ACPA involvement, core values and candidates' qualifications, excuse me, and ideas for contribution. The depth and quality of the responses to the application questions around equity and inclusion and diversity is a critical part of our process of deciding who will actually be slated. Creation of a diverse ballot is the other part that's important for us. So candidates, self-identified racial and ethnic identities and tribal affiliations in the application is important, and other diverse aspects of candidates and identities in self-disclosed application. These will all be considered in our slating process. The election results. Members voting concludes on Friday, December 6th. On a ballot where there are 2 or more candidates slated, the qualified candidates receiving the greatest number of votes for the respective position shall be elected. On ballots where there are more than 2 candidates slated, and the candidate receiving the greatest number of votes has a margin of 10% or more over the candidate with the next highest number of votes. The election will be completed with the qualified candidates receiving the greatest number of votes for the respective position shall be elected. If the candidate receiving the greatest number of votes has a margin less than 10% over the candidate with the next highest votes, a runoff election will occur.
Thank you, Jamie. I'll step in here and talk through the final part of our session that we have for you. Is a lot of our leaders are interested in pursuing governing board roles, but may not know much about what it means or how it's different to be in association governance as a board member. So we thought we'd spend a little time introducing you to what it means to be a part of a governing structure of an association. Association governance is defined by the Association of Associations, talks about the governing board being kind of the epicenter or having the responsibility of balancing an organization's processes, the culture of its membership and of its history, as well as the structural components that lead to operations and involvement opportunities. And so the board really, in all of their decisions and efforts, try to balance to make sure there's alignment between our culture and our structure, between our structure and our processes, and between our processes and our culture. Many times, folks come to board leadership interest because they've had really great experiences. They're motivated based on the experiences that they've had as a member, and then are sometimes surprised by what it means and what the duty is to be a governance leader. And so when you are on a board, your responsibility is to broadly advocate for the needs of the association at large. And often, many times, many of us come to a board leadership role having a particular knowledge from an involvement opportunity or opportunities and experiences that we've had, and have to spend some time getting more knowledgeable and more comfortable in things that we haven't had responsibility or involvement in the past. Because as a board member, you want to be broadly educated and responsible for the work of the association. The purposes of a governing board, you'll use that broad knowledge towards identifying and being responsible for both the mission and purpose of the association. That's the responsibility of the board. A board also recruits and orients new members of the board, as well as assessing the performance of the board over time. You will ensure effective strategic planning for the association. The board also supervises the executive director, who's the senior executive on the staff, so the selecting and the supporting and assessment of performance of the executive director of ACPA. Another responsibility of the governing board is ensuring adequate financial resources. And a lot of times that happens through the overseeing of resources related to budget, financial controls, audits, and decision making. A board also is responsible for determining and strengthening programs and services offered to members. A board member wants to also enhance the organization's public image, our brand, our message, etc. And then finally, the purpose of a board is to ensure the legal and ethical integrity and maintaining accountability of the association. So all of the conversations that the board has need to relate to one of or more of these 10 purposes. If we're not doing that, the board can have a tendency to shift away from strategy and policy and move towards operations and activities in this continuum of possible roles. Where possible, we want the board to be closer to strategy and policy rather than management, operations, and activities, because there are other staff and volunteer leaders who are involved more in the management and operations and activities, and we want the board to be at strategic and policy oversight levels. So when you're in a board meeting, the things that you should have front and center of your fiduciary responsibility to the association at large, this is in addition to being, member and human-centered in our approach, is that you want to keep in mind your responsibility for mission and purpose, strategy and goals, operating budgets, our long-term viability through investments, our membership experience, our performance of programs and services, and our image and our public relations. These are, again, the things that the board should have regular and ongoing conversations about. The structure of the board is that there are 17 voting officers and 1 non-voting officer. As the executive director, I am the non-voting officer on the board and play the role of the secretary and treasurer of the board. For purposes of helping to understand kind of different roles on the board a little bit, the image on the screen talks about the executives being the presidents, the president, the past president, and the vice president. The director roles on the board are equity and inclusion. As Wendy mentioned, that one is up for election in this process. There's a director of external relations, director of membership development, director of professional development, and a director of research and scholarship. The director roles on the board actually oversee some of the management and task-oriented nature of our work. So they each have a portfolio of responsibilities that often show up in terms of actions and activities for the association. Our coordinators are the ones that there are 4 up for election this time, all that are listed on the screen: coalitions and networks, communities of practice, international divisions and members, state and regional chapters, with the exception of commissions. That assembly coordinator role is not up for election in this process. And our coordinators serve as liaisons and links between the board and our entity groups of the association. And finally, members at large as a structure are individuals who represent different levels of work in our field. They are not intended to represent all the voices of the members at that same position level or status, but a voice of a faculty member. So there's a faculty member at large, there's an entry-level member at large, a mid-level member at large, and a senior-level member at large. Our member at larges serve on a number of the committees of the association, again, as voices of people at different position and career levels in their work. I mentioned committees just a few minutes ago, and our bylaws do name formal committees as the way the board goes about its work. The names of the committees are listed there on the screen. They're also available on the elections website or the bylaws website. These committees are formal committees of the board. Some of the board members are on the committees, and some of these committees involve people who are appointed by the board or by the chair of that committee for the board. The board can also add in any ad hoc committees or task forces at any time. And so whereas the bylaws name ongoing committees on the previous slide, the board can at any time designate a new committee or a task force for specific purposes of the association. And so there have been several throughout its history, including the current External Relations Advisory Board, the Senior Student Affairs Officer Advisory Board, and our Assessment Oversight Task Force as examples of committees and task forces that the board might form over time as needed. As you're thinking about potentially applying for or nominating others for an ACPA leadership role, we wanted to give a realistic time expectation. This is service to the profession, service to the association, and so these are significant time commitments that we are asking for folks to commit to. Based on current folks in roles, we estimate that people applying for the vice president, or the presidential cycle of vice president, president, and past president, should expect to commit 15 to 20 hours per week for the next 3 years to ACPA board membership. Folks in director roles, again, those have direct portfolio kinds of oversight that they do. That's estimated at 10 to 15 hours a week commitment. Our assembly coordinator roles, because they are both in governing board meetings and committees, but also in the assembly and entity meetings, that's estimated at 10 to 15 hours per week. And then our member large positions are estimated at 5 to 10 hours per week. So figuring out in your life and work schedule where you feel like you have the time and capacity to contribute, if not now, maybe later, maybe at another point in your experience. Jamie, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much, Chris. We're hoping that this information was helpful to you. And if you have further questions about any of this, again, please feel free to reach out. Note that the nominations deadline is Friday, September 23rd. Again, you can self-nominate or nominate others, please do. The application deadline is Friday, September 30th. 2019, again at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And forms are all available at myacpa.org/elections. Thank you so much for joining us for this, and look forward to hearing from and seeing you in the process.